And for more on this, I can welcome Gareth Redmond-King, who is head of the International Programme at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit in London. Good morning, Gareth, and thank you very much for joining us. The World Meteorological Organization warns of a strong possibility of an extreme weather fallout from El Nino. Can I ask you, what might this entail?
It will involve different things in different parts of the world, and in many cases we've already seen what happens not only from the last El Nino, but from the increasing extremes that we see from climate change. El Nino tends, as Antonio Guterres put it very well, to pour fuel on that particular fire. So it tends to intensify and make more dangerous the climate impacts that we already see. Different parts of the area around the Pacific will experience it differently. It tends to bring much wetter conditions with very much more intense and dangerous storms down the Pacific coast of the US, for example, and tends to mean much drier and much hotter weather across Australasia, South and Southeast Asia. With all the kind of, and that is on top of, as I say, those climate change impacts that we already see.
Now, what can governments do at such short notice now to counteract the effects?
I mean, it almost wouldn't matter how much notice we ever have of El Nino. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a natural phenomenon. The problem for us really is climate change. That is something that we know is happening. It's something that we've known for a long time is happening. And it's something that we know exactly what the solution is. The only solution we have, in fact, to tackling climate change is to reduce our planet warming emissions from burning fossil fuels to net zero by the middle of the century. So the faster we do that, the better chance we have of halting climate change, limiting further temperature increase. We've already warmed the planet by 1.4 degrees. And then actually El Nino is far less of a threat. It is always going to add heat into our climate system. But if it's adding heat into a cooler system, then it poses much less danger.
Now, the El Nino phenomenon is generally a global event, or at least covering many parts of the world. Some regions would certainly be more at risk than others, even if they are not hit quite as badly as other regions. What parts of the world might be most vulnerable to this?
Well, in one sense, the places that are most vulnerable to this are the places that are most vulnerable to climate change. They're the poorest parts of the world with least resilience, least resource to enable them to adapt and recover from climate impacts. In a more practical sense, the areas around the Pacific are the areas that will be hit sort of first and hardest, because that's where the heat is concentrated. Although it adds additional heat into the climate system overall. So, we can expect it will probably last about 9 months. The El Nino phenomenon normally does last about that long. We can expect hotter conditions for the whole of that period across the world. So I think we could probably reasonably expect that 2027 will be the next year to break the record for the hottest year. In Europe, we will feel it in that sense, just a bit more heat, but we'll feel it very directly as well in terms of the effect that it will have on our food imports and on crops and harvests worldwide and in the areas most affected.
Now, the ferocity of El Nino events long predates global warming, but is climate change making them more damaging, or could we even say that it's vice versa, that El Nino events are exacerbating the effects of climate change?
I think that's right. I think it's the other way. It's El Nino is turbocharging climate change. It's the fact that it's adding heat into a system that we have already heated by 1.4 degrees means that it's just increasing the danger. It's like we're in a very, very hot room and somebody decides to turn on the heating and light the fire. So yeah, El Nino is exacerbating the climate change impacts that we already see. And of course, look how dangerous they are when we don't have El Nino. We've just seen the hottest May temperatures in the UK, the record beaten by 2 degrees. I think France has seen the hottest May temperatures. Other northern European countries experience the same heat dome. So, El Nino is, again, as Guterres put it so well, throwing fuel on that particular fire.
Now, the 1877-1878 El Nino event was the strongest on record, and it resulted in the deaths of an estimated 50 million people worldwide, including in famines as far apart as Brazil and China. Is the world better equipped today to deal with another event of this scale, should it happen?
In lots of senses, yes, because of the globalized food system that we have. But in other senses, we are perhaps more of us exposed to the food insecurity that something like this can bring. I think we're better equipped in that we understand it better. We have more experience of it. We know and understand climate change. We know exactly what the solution is to climate change. So we can certainly mitigate it. And we're in that sense, if we really kind of get our act together on tackling climate change and getting to net zero by mid-century, then we will be better placed for all future El Niños. The issue with the one we're about to face is, of course, that it is coming in the midst of our second fossil fuel crisis in 5 years as well. So we've got additional pressures on the food system globally. For example, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is preventing the flow of fertilizers around the world. So very soon, perhaps even already, places are going to find themselves affected when it comes to needing those fertilizers to plant crops. So we've got that in the mix, as well as the climate change impacts on food, and then El Nino adding heat into the system. That is what the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations mean by getting ready and making sure we are equipped to support the people who are most exposed to the risk of famine, but also so that we can manage food supply chains globally, because any country threatened with food shortages and dramatically rising price rises, and we're already seeing both of those things in many countries around the world now, but any country threatened with that faces the risk of social unrest, as various national security advisors have been advising, certainly here in the UK recently.
Thank you very much for that. Gareth Redmond-King, head of the international programme at the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit in London.